June 8th, 1928, 10:23 a.m. Angelo's Barbershop on South Wabash Avenue. 4 chairs, black leather, chrome fixtures polished to a mirror shine. The smell of bay rum and talcum powder hung in the air. A radio in the corner played Benny Goodman softly. 3 customers waited on the wooden bench near the door, reading newspapers. 2 barbers worked in silence, scissors snipping rhythmically. In chair number 3, Al Capone sat with his eyes closed, a hot towel draped across his face. Angelo stood beside him, stropping a straight razor against leather. Back and forth, back and forth. The sound was hypnotic, meditative. This was Thursday. Capone came every Thursday at 10:15 a.m. Same chair, same barber, same routine for 3 years. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. The produce vendors across the street, the shoeshine boy on the corner, the beat cops who walked this stretch of Wabash. Everyone knew, which is why Detective Sergeant William Cusack knew exactly where to find him. The door opened. A small bell above it chimed. Detective Cusack walked in wearing a gray suit, his badge clipped to his belt, visible. He was 34 years old, 12 years on the force, with a reputation for following procedure to the letter. He carried a leather folder under his left arm. He stopped just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust to the dimmer interior light. The barbershop went quiet, not suddenly, gradually. One barber stopped cutting, then the other. The customers looked up from their newspapers. The radio kept playing, but it seemed quieter somehow, like the music was retreating. Angelo's hand stopped mid-stroke on the razor strop. Capone didn't move. The hot towel stayed on his face. His hands rested on the armrests, relaxed. His breathing was steady, even. "Barbershop's full," Angelo said quietly. His English carried a thick Sicilian accent. "You need appointment." Cusack shook his head slightly. "I'm not here for a shave." He opened the leather folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I'm here for Al Capone." The towel on Capone's face didn't move. Angelo set down the razor strop, carefully, on the shelf beside the basin. His movements were slow, deliberate. "Mr. Capone is customer. He's in middle of shave." "I can see that," Cusack said. He held up the paper. "I have a warrant for his arrest, issued this morning by Judge Hartigan. Failure to appear for questioning regarding municipal tax obligations." One of the customers on the bench folded his newspaper, set it down, stood up slowly, and walked toward the door. Cusack stepped aside to let him pass. The bell chimed as the man left. Then the second customer stood, then the third. Within 30 seconds, the barbershop had cleared, except for Cusack, Angelo, the second barber who'd frozen mid-cut on an invisible customer's hair, and Capone, still reclined in chair 3 with a towel on his face. "Mr. Capone," Cusack said, his voice professional, neutral, "I need you to come with me." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Capone's right hand moved, slowly. He reached up and lifted the edge of the hot towel, folding it back just enough to expose his eyes. He looked at Cusack, not in anger, not in defiance, just looked at him with the calm, steady gaze of the man interrupted during a routine. "What time is it?" Capone asked. His voice was quiet, conversational. Cusack glanced at his watch. 10:26. "My appointment started at 10:15, Capone said. "Angelo's got another customer at 11. That gives him 34 minutes to finish my shave, trim my hair, and clean me up proper." He lowered the towel back over his face. "You're welcome to wait." Cusack looked at the warrant in his hand, looked at Capone reclined in the chair, looked at Angelo standing motionless beside the basin. This wasn't in the manual. The procedure was clear: present warrant, effect arrest, transport to precinct. Simple, direct. But standing in this barbershop, watching a man receive a shave while ignoring an arrest warrant, Cusack felt the situation slipping into territory the manual didn't cover. "Mr. Capone," Cusack said again, keeping his voice level, "this is an official warrant. You're required to comply." "I understand," Capone said from under the towel, "and I will comply." In 33 minutes, when Angelo's finished, he paused. "Unless you want to interrupt the man's shave, pull him out of the chair half done, walk him through the street with lather on his face." Cusack said nothing, because that's exactly what the situation was becoming. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he was already seeing how that would look, how the newspapers would describe it. Detective Cusack drags Capone from Barbershop mid-shave. The photograph, the optics, the questions about whether this urgency was really necessary for a tax questioning. Capone shifted slightly in the chair, getting more comfortable. "You got coffee in here, Angelo?" "Yes, Mr. Capone." "Pour the detective a cup. He's gonna wait." Angelo moved to the back of the shop where a small pot sat on a hot plate. He poured coffee into a white ceramic cup, brought it to Cusack, offered it with both hands like a peace offering. Cusack didn't take it. "I'm on duty." "Suit yourself," Capone said. The towel still covered his face. "Angelo, you can start." Angelo hesitated, looking at Cusack. The detective stood there, warrant in hand, badge visible, authority clear. But he didn't move forward, didn't reach for Capone, didn't escalate. After a 5-second pause that felt much longer, Angelo picked up the straight razor. He tested the edge with his thumb. Satisfied, he removed the towel from Capone's face, draped it over the chair's headrest, and tilted Capone's head back slightly. Then he began to apply fresh lather with a badger hair brush. Slow circles, methodical. Cusack watched. He could leave. He could call for backup. He could physically remove Capone from the chair. All of these options existed, but each one carried weight, consequences, complications. Calling for backup meant admitting he couldn't handle a barbershop arrest alone. Physically removing Capone meant creating a scene, possibly a confrontation, over a tax questioning. Leaving meant returning to the precinct empty-handed, explaining to his sergeant why he'd failed to execute a simple warrant. None of these options were good, so Cusack stayed. He stood near the door, warrant in hand, and watched Angelo paint lather onto Al Capone's face with the care of an artist. The radio continued playing. Benny Goodman faded out. An advertisement came on. Lucky Strike cigarettes. So smooth, so round, so fully packed. Angelo finished applying the lather. He lifted the straight razor, angled it to catch the light, checking the edge one final time. Then he placed it against Capone's right cheek, just below the cheekbone, and began the first stroke. Downward. Slow. The sound of the blade scraping through lather and stubble was the only sound in the shop besides the radio. Cusack found himself watching the process, the precision, the trust required. A man with a blade at another man's throat, the vulnerability of the position. Capone's eyes were closed again, his face completely relaxed, as if a detective with an arrest warrant wasn't standing 10 feet away, as if this was just another Thursday. Angelo finished the first stroke, wiped the blade on a clean towel draped over his shoulder, positioned the razor for the second stroke. "You know what the problem is, detective," Capone said suddenly, eyes still closed, face still covered in lather. Cusack didn't respond. "The problem," Capone continued, his voice measured, calm, "is timing." Angelo paused with the razor an inch from Capone's face, waiting to see if his customer was going to keep talking. When Capone didn't continue immediately, Angelo resumed the shave. "A warrant is a serious thing," Capone went on. "Represents the authority of the court, the government, the people. I respect that." Another stroke. Angelo worked carefully around Capone's mouth. "But a man's routine, that's serious too. Not to the court, maybe, not to the government, but to the man." He paused while Angelo worked on his upper lip, the most delicate part of the shave. "I've been coming here every Thursday for 3 years. Angelo depends on that. His family depends on that. The consistency, the reliability." Angelo moved to the left side of Capone's face now, long, confident strokes. "If you let me walk me out of here right now, half done, what does that say to Angelo?
What does that say to every person who saw me get dragged out for something that could have waited 30 minutes? Cusack shifted his weight. It says the law doesn't wait for convenience.
Does it? Capone asked. His eyes opened. He looked directly at Cusack while Angelo continued shaving his neck. Or does it say that the law's more interested in making a point than making sense? The question hung in the air. Cusack had no answer for it. Or rather, he had several answers, all of them complicated, none of them simple enough for this moment. Angelo finished the left side, moved to the jawline, the most visible part, the part everyone would see when Capone walked out of this shop. "I'm not resisting," Capone said. "I'm not refusing. I'm asking for 30 minutes to finish what I started. Then I'll walk out with you. No complaint, no trouble. I'll answer whatever questions Judge Hartigan wants answered." He closed his eyes again. "Seems reasonable to me." And that was the problem, Cusack realized. It did seem reasonable, which made this entire situation more difficult than it should have been. The law was clear, the warrant was valid, but the execution, the actual human moment of enforcement, was revealing itself to be more nuanced than the paperwork suggested. Angelo finished the shave. He took a hot towel from a brass warmer, tested the temperature against his wrist, then draped it over Capone's face. The lather and remaining stubble would soften under the heat. Cusack looked at his watch. 10:38 a.m. 12 minutes had passed since he'd walked in. Capone had asked for 34 minutes total, 22 minutes remaining. The second barber, who'd been standing frozen this entire time, quietly set down his scissors and walked to the back of the shop, disappeared through a curtain, probably to a phone, probably to make a call. Cusack knew this, knew that reinforcements were likely being summoned, not police reinforcements, the other kind, and yet he didn't move to stop it, because stopping it would mean escalating, would mean acting, would mean making the choice he'd been avoiding for the last 12 minutes. Angelo removed the hot towel, examined Capone's face with a critical eye, found a small spot he'd missed near the ear, applied a touch more lather, shaved it clean. Then he took a cool towel, wiped away any remaining residue, patted the skin dry. "Bay rum or witch hazel?" Angelo asked. "Witch hazel today," Capone said. "Bay rum makes my face too red in this heat." Angelo selected a bottle from the shelf, poured a small amount into his palms, rubbed his hands together, and applied it to Capone's face with gentle pats. The astringent smell filled the shop, medicinal, clean. Then Angelo lifted the chair back to an upright position, removed the cloth cape from around Capone's neck, brushed away any stray hairs from Capone's collar with a soft brush. "Hair trim?" Angelo asked. Capone ran his hand over his head. "Just the neck. Cleaned it up." Angelo nodded, retrieved his clippers from the sanitizing solution, shook them dry, turned them on. The electric buzz filled the shop. Cusack watched as Angelo worked on the back of Capone's neck, precise lines, clean edges, professional. The same care he'd given to the shave. A man taking pride in his work regardless of the circumstances. The clippers stopped. Angelo brushed away the cut hairs, applied a touch more witch hazel to the neck. Then he stepped back. "Finished, Mr. Capone." Capone stood up from the chair for the first time since Cusack had entered. He stretched slightly, rolled his shoulders, walked to the mirror on the wall, examined Angelo's work, turned his head left, then right, ran his hand over his jaw. "Perfect," Capone said, "like always." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a money clip, counted out bills, more than the shave cost. He handed them to Angelo. "Thank you, Angelo." "Thank you, Mr. Capone. See you next Thursday?" Capone glanced at Cusack. "Depends on the detective here, but I'll do my best." He turned to face Cusack fully. His suit was impeccable, his face freshly shaved, clean, presentable. He looked like a businessman ready for a meeting. "I'm ready now, detective. You said you need me to come with you?" Cusack looked at the warrant in his hand, at Capone standing there, cooperative, calm, at Angelo putting away his tools, at the clock on the wall showing 10:57 a.m. 34 minutes.
Exactly what Capone had asked for. And in those 34 minutes, something had shifted. Not the law. The law remained the same. The warrant was still valid. But the context had changed. Cusack had made a choice, perhaps without fully realizing it, when he'd let Angelo begin that shave. He'd chosen to wait. And having chosen to wait, having allowed the completion of the routine, pulling Capone out now felt different than it would have at 10:26. It felt less like law enforcement and more like he'd lost something. "The warrant says questioning," Cusack said slowly, "for municipal tax obligations." "I understand," Capone replied. "Then I need to inform you that you're required to appear at the municipal building, 4th floor, Office of Revenue, tomorrow at 9 a.m. Cusack folded the warrant, placed it back in his leather folder. "Failure to appear will result in immediate arrest and detention." Capone nodded. "I'll be there." 9 a.m. sharp. 9 a.m., Capone confirmed. Cusack stood there for another moment, waiting to see if Capone would smile, would gloat, would make some gesture that would force Cusack to reassert authority. But Capone did none of those things. He simply stood there, freshly shaved, waiting for the detective to leave or to act. Cusack turned and walked to the door. The bell chimed as he opened it. He stepped out into the bright June sunlight, into the noise of Wabash Avenue, into the world that continued outside Angelo's barbershop, regardless of what happened inside. Behind him, he heard the door close, heard the bell chime again. He walked half a block before he stopped, looked at the leather folder in his hand, and tried to sort out what had just happened. He'd entered with a warrant. He was leaving without an arrest. Technically, he'd served notice. Technically, Capone had been informed of his obligation to appear. Technically, Cusack had done his job. But standing on that sidewalk in the morning heat, watching a produce truck rumble past, Cusack knew that wasn't the whole story. Inside Angelo's barbershop, Capone put on his hat, adjusted it in the mirror. "You got a customer at 11?" he asked Angelo. Angelo glanced at the appointment book. "Yes, Mr. DeLuca." "Good. Don't want to make you late." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "That detective, he'll probably be back." "You think so?" Angelo asked. "Maybe not him, but someone like him. The warrant's real. The obligation's real." He opened the door. "I'll handle it tomorrow. 9 a.m., like he said." "You really going?" Capone looked back at Angelo. "I said I would." Then he stepped out onto Wabash Avenue. The door closed behind him. The bell chimed again, and Angelo stood in his empty barbershop, looking at chair number 3, at the spot where Al Capone had sat for 34 minutes while a detective with a warrant waited. He picked up the towels, started cleaning the station, preparing for his 11 o'clock appointment. Because that's what you did. You kept your routine. You honored your commitments. You finished what you started, even when the law walked in and asked to stop.